All right, Joe, do you remember that time that you attended a 2-day virtual conference and the last one of the day was the best one and hands down your favorite one?
I think I do, but when was that?
Well, that's today. That's actually right now. But just kidding, everybody. Welcome. We're not going to claim to be the best presentation at the conference, but we definitely want to have some fun with you today and share things that we've learned transitioning our public speaking classes from mostly in-person to synchronous and asynchronous components. So thank you for being here with us today.
And thank you for being the VIP crew who made it to like the very end of the second day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're gonna have some fun today. In a second, Joe is going to say a word, and I'd like for you guys in the discussion forum, aka the chat that a lot of you have already been using, tell us the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word he'll say. Don't overthink it, don't stress, just first word association, whatever you think, please put it in the chat for us. Ready?
The word is change. Remember that game show Password, I think it was, where there's like a secret word. The secret word is change. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word change?
All right, pop that in the chat.
Move, Barbara. Oh, Barbara's here. Barbara said move, advance, turmoil, says Antonius. Oh boy. Resistance. What else?
Ooh. We have another Tatiana in the house. Cool. Rarely do I meet other Tatianas.
We've got Tatiana with a Y and Tatiana with an I.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So resistance, turmoil, advance, move. Anything else? Anything else that comes to mind? What's interesting about that is that there's some little bit of positive and a little bit of negative, right? So I think it speaks to the overall narrative about how change can be scary, but also exciting and a little fun sometimes. So I really like that the narrative that we're painting here it represents that blend of, I think, what we all feel whenever we experience change, because change, it can be a good thing, but change can also be a scary thing sometimes too, right, Tatiana?
Absolutely. And quick shout out to Juan, who is behind the scenes today, making sure our tech runs smoothly. When we asked him this question earlier, the word for him was malleable. And even though we have this really long title in our presentation today, shifting a public speaking curriculum to synchronous and asynchronous delivery, our message really is about change and adaptability. We want and expect that kind of change from our students, but we also need to acknowledge that we have to be ready. And this past year has shown us the importance of that. And I'm sure all of you guys would agree if I could ask you directly. These skills right now, huge. And that's our message for you today. We have to be adaptable and ready for change. So that's it. We're done. Have a nice day, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Just kidding. Of course, we've got a lot more content for you. Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana Rodriguez. I'm a creative public speaking professor here at Rutgers. I do interactive leadership corporate training. I'm a photographer and a video storyteller as well. If we're not already connected on LinkedIn, I would love for us to be able to do that, continue these types of conversations. I'm always looking to speak with other people who are creative and interested in doing really awesome things in the classroom.
And hello, everyone. My name is Joe Yankus. In my day job, I am an instructional designer at Montclair State University. Prior to that, I was also an instructional designer here at Rutgers for a few years. And in addition to that, I teach public speaking as well. So Tatiana and I have had a chance to meet and collaborate through teaching public speaking. Absolutely. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn. You see at Joseph Yankus, you can find me on there.
Okay. We're connected on LinkedIn, right, Joe?
Better be. No, I think we are. So today we're going to take you through our experience, teaching public speaking during the pandemic and the transition that happened there. And we've broken it down into 3 categories here. We're going to start by talking about what we did. So specifically in the shift, some specific things we did during that shift. But more importantly than what we did specifically, of course, is how did our students respond to that? So what they said about it. We're going to look at some data points that we collected about the student feedback we received about the transition of moving public speaking online. And then finally, what we learned. So what did we learn from the data we collected from our students? What did we learn from this transition overall? And how have we applied it going forward? So let's start with what we did. Well, We're going to go over a few different things. And in this, as we go through this conversation, just to give you a little bit of context and background, my section of public speaking is asynchronous. That means that we do not hold any mandatory live class sessions. The course itself resides in the Canvas learning management system. All of the learning modules are available there, activities, content, etc., reside within Canvas. And Tatiana teaches a synchronous public speaking section, which means that each week she holds live class sessions. So she has the opportunity to connect live each week with her students, whereas I have the opportunity really only asynchronously through some of the different channels that I've created to make sure that engagement and communication remains as high as possible. And one of the channels that I've created to help engage with my students dealing with the asynchronous modality is Slack. And if you have heard of or use Slack, Slack is a platform where you can engage with a community of people that you bring together for one reason or another. It's used often professionally in like work contexts and bringing departments and communities together. But in my case, I created a Slack community for my public speaking class because since I don't have that same opportunity that Tatiana has each week to connect with her audience synchronously, I wanted to make sure there was a space where maybe it was slightly more synchronous than the Canvas platform, which sometimes just through discussions, there's hours and days of gaps between communication and students responding to each other. Slack can be a little more immediate. So I saw that as an opportunity to maybe create that space where perhaps I could talk about current events. Perhaps I could talk about something that happened today in the news. And it was particularly interesting last semester while we were going through the presidential election. There were a lot of opportunities to talk about public speaking and
yes, Joe, I remember you mentioning that you had students commenting in Slack about the elections and how it connects to public speaking. So that was a really cool connection to make live with this platform.
Yeah. And I don't know, was there ever a better time to teach public speaking than during the presidential debates last semester? I mean, there was so much content there to talk about. And it was so interesting and great to have this Slack community because there wasn't really an equivalent space in Canvas to do that because Canvas was very structured for each of the learning modules and the units for the course. And this gave us that place to have that more organic conversation. So I had some channels related to that. And then I had channels related to some of the more specific assignments during the class. So if someone had a question about the informative speech, they could post that question there and I would get back to them. And then, of course, they could message me directly and message each other directly there as well. And since I was using Slack already at work, it was super helpful to have Slack for the public speaking class because if a student direct messaged me, I would get a notification. I could pop over in 15 seconds and just shoot them a response. And it was much more immediate than them sending me an email. And maybe I didn't see it for a couple hours. Maybe I was busy in meetings all day, didn't have a chance to read my email. So Slack was a much more immediate way for my students to reach me and for me to field their questions throughout the semester. And it was one of the things that when we talk about the data points later of feedback we received, that I got a lot of positive feedback about the immediacy of my responses to them because I was connecting with them on Slack and able to answer their questions so quickly. So it was an interesting experiment doing that. And I think it's gone well. And Tatiana and I were talking before the session started about some different ways maybe to achieve the same outcome.
Yes, and even though my section is synchronous, I still think the organization of a platform like this is fantastic. So I've been considering using something like Slack myself. I hear my students talking about Discord all the time. So I just downloaded Discord so I could compare between Slack and Discord and see which one I think could be a really great choice. So those are some things for you guys to consider. Maybe you're already using some of these channels. I also use Google Voice and a separate number where I can text students directly. So you may have a system that's in place, but also think about a context like this with Slack and Discord as another option to check out.
And to piggyback off of that with what Tatiana said about Discord, something to think about too in the way you reach your students is thinking about reaching them where they already are, right? So Slack, it's used professionally. You have a lot of people in business and elsewhere working and using Slack, but I doubt it has much traction in the undergraduate college realm, right? I don't know if students are really using Slack, but what they are using is Discord. And if you're familiar with Discord, it's basically the same thing, just it's utilized heavily in the gaming community. So there's a lot more familiarity with our demographic, with the undergraduate demographic that we're working with Discord. So definitely something to think about, reaching students where they already are.
Absolutely. And switching gears, Joe, one of my favorite things in the world, learning assistants. Been using learning assistants in the classroom for the past 2 semesters. I remember observing it from the active learning community professors and thinking, how do I get this in my classroom? So I connected with the Rutgers Learning Assistance Program. Easy, just look up Rutgers Learning Assistants. And what learning assistants are, they're not TAs, they're not teacher assistants because they don't pay, but learning, whether it's an in-person classroom or virtual, are there to help you facilitate small groups, conversations, activities, assignments. They make a wonderful addition to the classroom. And you can see how much I love them. That's exemplified in our gathering, our weekly meeting here, that we really have a great time together. They are students who have successfully taken the class previously. And so it's also an opportunity to highlight students as leaders who are just a semester, a year or 2 ahead of our current students. So it's a wonderful space to uplift student leaders, give them a chance to facilitate discussion, to add creativity. They give me input, they give me ideas. And then the students in the class have another direct connection to students. So my learning assistants decided to start a group me that sadly does not include me, but I get how that makes sense, so that the students have a space to connect directly with them. And that's what I love, is that we have various links and levels of communication in the classroom that enhances our classroom experience. So I'd love to know, any of you guys currently using learning assistants, if you can throw me a little yes in the discussion forum and let me know, because I'm curious, do we have people here who are currently using them? And if you haven't, I want to strongly urge you to get in touch with the Learning Assistance Program and find out about the process for your own department or your own course to be able to, because it had not previously been done in public speaking. That's what I was told. So this is something that I was able to start, and I find it tremendously valuable.
And I had the opportunity to meet with Tatiana and her learning assistants last semester when I was helping out during one of her live classes. And it was so fun. Like they were so engaged with her, and Tatiana did such a great job of kind of running the ship and getting them involved with the class. And it was just, I was so impressed with how. And then when I attended the live session too, I knew of the Learning Assistant Program, but I'd never really seen it in action until I had the opportunity to sit in on and help out with Tatiana's class. And they were involved. They were just as engaged with the students as Tatiana was. So it was really interesting to see, and I was just really impressed with just how involved they were with everything, from running activities to coordination to weekly meetings with Tatiana. It was super interesting.
And Tatiana, with a Y, chimed in the chat over here saying that she does use learning assistants. So really, guys, please at least explore it as an option for your classrooms, because I can't say enough good things about this program. Next thing that I definitely implemented was Flip. Now, I had already started flipping content, but this made it so that I had to start doing flips like crazy. So creating content is something I'm very comfortable with, because I shared with you that I'm also a photographer, videographer for many years. So making the video content came pretty naturally to me, and I was excited about doing it. I know not everybody feels the same way about making videos, but we all know how important it is. So flipping the classroom, making the content available in advance, so that when they came to class, it became more about the doing, the putting into practice, the discussion of the concepts. I also want to add that it's really important to consider different people who are introverted, people who are extroverted, because people are going to be comfortable with different levels of activities. And I know we can't please everybody with any one activity, but I think it's important that students know that we are thinking about them in their energy levels, their introversion and extroversion, their inclusivity, all kinds of things that we need to consider in the classroom, and breaking it up with flipped content. I added various segments to break up the monotony of lecturing or even pre-recorded content. We're doing quiz games, retrieval practice, student demonstrations, improvisation. I mean, it really opens up the time we are together to do so many fantastic activities. And I still do micro teaching, micro lectures, small things in the classroom. It's not like the only time I'll ever teach them anything is in those videos, not at all. but it just allows us for much more engaged and active learning style when we are actually together. And the importance of videos, Joe, you and I share this, so I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us about your.
Yes, the cup of joes. So in my asynchronous section, since, as I mentioned, I don't have that weekly opportunity like Tatiana does to connect live with them, I wanted to find a way to inject my own flavor, if you will, into the content. So as part of the public speaking online course that was in existence even pre-COVID, there was a series of lecture videos already in place produced by the course coordinator. And while that content was great and very useful, I wanted to make sure, because instructor presence obviously is so important, that I was injecting my own style into this. So each week I produced what I called a cup of joe, because of course I needed to try to think of some witty way to not just call it lecture 1 and 2 and 3. So cup of joe is what I came up with. And it is just my spin on some of the content of that particular week. So maybe it was the topic of attention getters, and I wanted to offer my own spin and examples of a good attention getter for a speech. Maybe it was the importance of, I don't know, maybe standing during a speech and trying a speech where you're standing instead of sitting, because a lot of times for the online delivery, students will just sit, and then sometimes there's a difference when you stand. So some of those different things that weren't necessarily covered in the pre-recorded lecture videos from the department, I tried to offer through the Cup of Joe lecture series, if I dare call it that. But and each of those videos was no more than 10 minutes or so. They were all pretty short, and I kept it that way on purpose because, as we, if you've ever attended any sort of talk on good practice, best practices for video production, chunking is always so important, and trying to keep these videos short and sweet and to the point, so that we keep retention throughout the video high, and that we keep our students engaged and don't post a 45-minute lecture necessarily. So the Cup of Joes was my response to inserting my presence in the course in the asynchronous environment.
And Joe has his Cup of Joes, and mine are called Top 2 Cents, whatever you like. I put my content on a new YouTube channel that I created on a platform that I'm building, which is Tatiana Teaches. So I would post the content that we're talking about, small chunks of content, visually interesting, on topic. And I've also started a student interview series where I bring in a student of mine in the past to discuss a topic of either leadership, public speaking, creativity, and self-care. The 4 things that I want to talk about all day, every day, giving another platform to highlight student voices on here, and bringing in professionals to chime in on things like the importance of video, or what we can learn as public speakers from performers and actors. So I've got this YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning a little more about public speaking content yourself, I totally invite you to check that out. That would be great, especially as I start to add more student interview series. If any of you are interested in hearing what our own students have to say about leadership and public speaking and creativity and self-care, I welcome you to check out the content on that channel too. Then Joe and I also, as just like we are today, we did a lot of collabs. Who have different perspectives as well to add. So we created a video for our students on a specific topic, mediated speaking, which is part of our course. Mediated speaking is what we're doing today, speaking online. And we touched on all of these 7 areas here and offer that. It's on my YouTube channel as well. And I think it's really important for us to all find partners. We can be guest speakers for each other. We can toss ideas around. We can help each other grow. We can vent together, all kinds of things. So I think collaboration was a really successful strategy that we've done together throughout this course.
And it was so much fun to collaborate on this. The screenshot Tatiana selected for this, it looks like I'm like doing some like, I don't know. It was a drum roll.
It was the drum roll. It was the drum roll.
It looked like I'm doing this. But the point is, it was a lot of fun. 2 heads are always better than one. And we both brought something unique and special to the table. And I was really proud of that video. So, if you ever have an opportunity to collaborate with like-minded colleagues to produce something great, go for it. We had a great time doing so.
Yeah, maybe we'll collaborate. We'll collaborate with some of you guys in the chat. You know how to reach us on LinkedIn. So if you have ideas to collaborate with us, or you want to come on my YouTube channel, be interviewed, let's talk. That would be so great.
So obviously what we did is important, but as I mentioned, what did our students say about it? That is so important to think about, and taking that student feedback and incorporating it into future iterations of the course is obviously something that's very important to us. So in order to collect that data, we did so through a few different means. The first being the more formal course evaluation surveys, where through the School of Communication are conducted both in the middle of the semester and at the end of the semester as well. So we have that mid-semester check-in, which is a formal assessment of how things are going, what can we do to make it better, what's going really well and we should keep doing, what's should we give second thought and could improve. So there's that sort of temperature check in the middle of the semester, and then we do it once more at the end of the semester. So then by that point, obviously that data sort of influences how we proceed for future semesters of the course. But at minimum, for all of the public speaking sections, they have those 2 points of feedback delivery to us, which is during the mid-semester and then the end of the semester feedback. But in addition to that, both Tatiana and I utilize informal check-ins with our students as well. In my asynchronous section, it took place through a Qualtrics survey, which I conducted during, I think, maybe the first few weeks of the semester, because I wanted to get a feel for how many students were interested for the asynchronous section in attending a synchronous session that was optional, because in the asynchronous section, I could not mandate their attendance at a synchronous live class. So I wanted to see how many students wanted to come to some sort of optional sessions throughout the semester. And then I did some other temperature checks throughout about Slack and some of the other things that I was trying and doing, because student voice is so important. We need to, they are our audience. We need to know what they're thinking and how they're feeling. I may love the idea of Slack and think, gosh, it's the best thing I've thought of all year, but then maybe they didn't like it. So having that feedback throughout was very important to me, both through those formal channels from the mid-semester and end of semester evaluations, and then just informally. And in addition to all of that, the last thing I did was I asked them to connect live with me at some point during the semester and set up a one-on-one meeting, because again, in the asynchronous section, I could potentially have students who I never speak to once throughout the entire semester, since I don't have those weekly opportunities to connect. So students would sign up for one-on-ones with me during office hours. And so I at least at one point in the semester got to, at minimum, say hello to everyone and check in with them.
And Shino or Shino, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but thank you so much for the Shino. Thank you for that positive encouragement there. Glad you're getting some great things to think about here. And Shahida, to answer your question, did they do the surveys as students don't normally respond? My experience has been a 50% response rate. Time. It goes up when you ask again. And when you, what we do in public speaking, which is for end of semester surveys, we offer a 1% extra credit to their final grade if the entire class does it. Since it is anonymous, we don't know who's done it. It's either everybody or nobody gets the extra credit. And I have been very successful with 100% end of semester survey results with that extra credit, and encouraging students to check in with their small teams that we built throughout the semester to make sure, because the deal is if everybody does it, everybody gets the extra credit, but we have to have 100%. So that's been very successful. Now, I also want to share some of the informal check-ins that I do. I do turn to the internet for crowdsourcing, for example, in places like Reddit. It's Reddit for any of you that are not familiar. And inside Reddit, there are subreddits, smaller online communities. Rutgers has a subreddit, and I turn to Rutgers subreddit. There's also one for professors. There's one for online learning. There's a student one. There's so many. There's a billion of them. So I turn to Rutgers subreddit to ask questions. I also do anonymous surveys, short and quick and sweet with my students. And I also do non-anonymous ones, so I know who's answering them. Some Google Forms is what I use. So I want to share with you a collection of responses that I've gotten from students in various different platforms that I think are very relevant and so important for us to hear and understand. My graduate and undergraduate work was in public health, and the biggest thing I took away from my education is that we should never try and do things for people without including people in the planning process. So this is my way of always including my students in the planning process. I would ask questions like this: what makes What do you wish your professor had done differently? They do really well. And then I would ask for activities or wish lists or tips or creative ideas, tips to encourage motivation, just basically any type of contribution that I can get from students, because you never know. Like, I can't think of everything. A great idea can come directly from the internet as well. And here are some of the things I heard back. One of my favorites: online classes are more isolated. It could be awkward at first to build community and perform group tasks. My calc professor did a good job of dealing with this by spending the first 5 minutes sharing random things he found interesting to make the class more comfortable. He called them humanizing activities. Later on, it felt more natural to ask questions and the like, and I highlighted and bolded and underlined humanizing activities for you because I love the way this particular student put it. And I agree, and maybe you agree too, that when you watch a video, when you're in a course yourself, when you get to know the person that's talking to you, the connection is so much easier and more enjoyable. So we need to think about that ourselves as educators. Are we coming across as human beings in our content, in our classes? So important thing to think. Here's I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'm highlighted for you the regular check-in part. I think instinctively we know this, but it can be difficult for us to do that because we've got so many other competing priorities, but students really value and appreciate regular check-ins. Also, these are some really great direct tips from a student. Have more low stakes assignment instead of few high stakes one, which is the way we do it in public speaking. Lots of opportunities for students to do well. Encouraging active participation, which is one of my favorite things to do, active participation in the classroom. Also, finding ways to have students talk to one another. And lastly, constant feedback, which is a theme. So this is really great tips that we got here. Another great quote: the main frustration that I've had from online classes is lack of contact with the professor. So I think that it is important for us to be able to be there for our students. This student says, I understand about work-life balance and you can't be available all the time, but a response with at least 24 hours is much appreciated. So just like us, when we ask questions of people, I think a response is truly appreciated. And if that can't happen within a reasonable time frame, I think we can let students know why that is. And here's another one: being nice helps so much. And then this was a comment: you seem like a professor who really cares when it doesn't feel like a lot of people do. So I think this is something worth considering, that a lot of students don't feel that professors. I think it's our job to help communicate that we really do. And I explicitly say that. I make it super clear. Keep going here. What's up on the screen right now is a comment from a letter that I got from a student at the end of last semester. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I highlighted a little piece in yellow that I wanted to share with you. Your dedication to your students creates a small community of diverse people who bond together. I have never ever come even a little bit close to getting a feel for all of my classmates' personalities like I do. I'm very introverted and I'm enjoying my time in isolation. But whenever my family or friends ask me how virtual classes are going, I always respond, I like virtual learning because I think I'm gaining the same amount whether I'm there in person or at home, except for public speaking. What you have created is special and unique. And then she signed it off, Prachadana. And I wanted to share this with you because I think when we make an effort to engage our students, to do humanizing activities, to help them get to do those things that the student suggested, feedback, checking in, having students get to know each other, it creates a different kind of space that students can feel really good being a part of. And she signed off Prachadana, which is not her real name, but I did an activity in class where I invited all my students to change their name on Zoom to whatever name they would be as a performer, an entertainer, a rapper. And that was her name that she chose. So I thought it was such an interesting touch that she signed off with that name. So I know that that activity was also meaningful in the class.
That's so fun. And it's stuck. It's stuck, right? Like, it was not just a one, they remembered it for the hour. They remembered it when they went back and gave you that feedback later. So that's so awesome. So we've spoken to what we did. We've spoken to how our students have responded to what we did, but what did we learn, right? The past year has been a learning experience for all of us on this call, I'm sure. You've all learned a little something about transitioning to online in a very, very rapid fashion, and some lessons learned along the way, and maybe going into the past spring semester feeling a little more polished about doing that. So what have we learned throughout this experience? Well, the first thing that we learned is that the first time is the hardest. And I'm sure, give me a thumbs up in the chat, or a yes, or a heck yeah if you agree with me. I think the first time was the absolute hardest. And for many of us, that was that would have been spring 2020, a year ago. And that was a crazy time. But maybe going into summer, maybe going into fall, you felt a little bit better. You had some content going into the fall semester from the spring that you were able to use again, or maybe to just, now that you've done it once, you're feeling a little more polished about it. So the first time is the hardest. And for many of us, we have gotten over that hump. So now that you've gotten over the hump of doing this for the first time, how do we make it better? How do we streamline it? How do we enhance it? So get over that first try. If you have still, for some reason, never taught online, even if you were or weren't during the pandemic, the first time will be the hardest, but it will get better. Just always remember that. Now, the second one was very interesting for me in the asynchronous section. When I can speak to my experience, and Tatiana can maybe share with hers as well. So for me, as I mentioned, my section of public speaking is asynchronous. That means that I cannot mandate their attendance at live sessions. So when I mentioned earlier to you that I surveyed them about the possibility of attending a live session, the feedback was, no, thank you. I'm fine. For the most part, there were a few students who indicated to me that they did sort of crave that kind of interaction, and I tried to make an effort one-on-one with some of those students. But for the most part, if something was optional, whether it was really anything, a live session or anything optional that was brewing in my head, or even some optional conversations in the Slack community, I did find that engagement was somewhat low in those. So what I learned from that is, what can I do, or what should I do to make sure that some of these great things that I'm trying to include, like the Cup of Joe videos, which are formally a requirement to watch, but I did find that, we'll get to that in a second, that viewership was not what it could have been. Or if I want to host a live session because I think it's a good idea. But the tricky part is that when things are optional, students are all very busy. They are trying to manage their time the best they can, especially during a global pandemic. So I found in the asynchronous section that most things that I offered as part of kind of an optional package were not necessarily met with excitement and high attendance on my end.
And a third thing we learned, I want to teach you this new term. Maybe you've heard of it, but I just recently read an article about it. I had not heard this term myself. We know asynchronous, we know synchronous, and here now we have this new thing called bisynchronous. I'm hopefully pronouncing that correctly, which is a blending of synchronous and asynchronous. And I bring this up not because I have any answers, but because I think that this is going to be a huge part of our future, where there will be things about synchronous that work well, asynchronous that we bring in and include in that. So we might want to be blending some things from both of these worlds into our classes in the future. I really think that that's going to be a real thing. Fourth lesson is, I want you, and this especially comes to you from someone who does video production work and has been creating video stories for a long time. Think evergreen, meaning record content that doesn't date, that doesn't mean you have to re-record it again next semester. So, and you might, for example, in my class, I will record personalized videos for that section in the beginning, introduce myself, and I'm going to say what semester we're in, and maybe even say some names. But I can't use that same one for next time, right? So when you record content, try to think about making it evergreen, meaning it will not die out in the winter, right? It will last you several semesters. There will come a time when you need to record new content, of course, but we don't want to re-record the same thing every semester. So make sure that you're keeping your videos evergreen. This is an important tip.
And thinking about that video content, right? You go through all of the work of ideating, producing, creating this content, and then we put it out there, right? But we can't necessarily control what happens after we put it out there. But what we can do is watch the views. And what I mean by that is keeping an eye on to what extent are your students watching the content that you are putting out there. So for example, Tatiana puts her videos on YouTube, so she can keep an eye on how many views she's getting on those videos there. In my section in the asynchronous course, I utilize Kaltura. So if you teach at Rutgers and have access to the Rutgers instance of Canvas, you have access to Kaltura. And when you host videos in Kaltura, you can actually see specifically which students watch those videos, and you can see for how long they watch the video. So you can really get a feel for students are watching the first 6 minutes of the video, and then I notice that attendance or that the views go down the drain. So what does that tell me? Well, that tells me maybe if I had a 10-minute video, maybe it's too long. Maybe 6 minutes is the magic number there. So what can I learn from that data? And also it just gives me an opportunity to see, okay, only 30% of the class is really watching these videos. Maybe I can just kind of nudge them in an announcement a little bit and say, remember that these videos are helpful, and explain why they're helpful. And so watching those numbers can help you ultimately.
Yes, and I work really hard not to assume. You know what happens when we assume, right? I try to approach the class, okay, I see that only 15 people in the class out of 50 watched the video. So I'm not going to come in and assume that it's because they're all lazy or my videos suck and they don't care about them, but walk in saying, guys, I noticed this video was only watched this many times. Want to tell me what are your thoughts about that? Then I can get to hear, is it overwhelmed? Is it disinterest? Just to assume and come at it, not to assume, but to come at it as a question and try and figure some things out. In the future, I am considering using PlayPosit, which is all one word. I think this is a source not a lot of professors know about. It is available to us at Rutgers, and it's Play, P-O-S-I-T, PlayPosit. It's like a play on play and pause it, but it's P-L-A-Y-P-O-S-I-T. And Shelly, see that you're using it. That's really cool. This way, we put the videos on there and we can program interactions, because the idea is that, hey, if we're going to spend all this time making the videos, they should be watched, especially if we're being concise, they're on task, they're valuable content. And even I'm considering also watching these videos and engaging with them for points, because currently right now, all of my flipped content is not for points, because I wanted it to be more of a pressure-free situation, but it's something I'm considering right now. Barbara, you're using it too. And so we got some love for PlayPosit in the chat going on right now. I think it's a really great tool, and the support for it is excellent as well. Like, we have access to the people who run the program. If we need help setting it up, they help me come up with a really great way to do a project that they'd not previously done before. So I really find the support in it really well, and quizzes can be added in it too. Yes, so PlayPosit is a great tool, and I think that might engage more, because like we were saying before, students need to prioritize. If something is not worth points, they might not be doing it just because it's not worth points. So it's something for all of us to consider.
And
also,
no, so thinking more generally about your presence as an instructor, it's something to keep in mind, right? Are you present, right? And for Tatiana's synchronous section, she is able to be present weekly at a certain time when she meets with her students. For an asynchronous course, so I'm curious, those of you on here, if you're teaching synchronous, asynchronous, or a blend, or a hybrid, whatever it may be, because presence matters no matter what, right? So we have to make sure that we are present in the course in whatever format that takes place in asynchronous or the synchronous modality. So for me, asynchronously, my presence comes into play through just announcements, through pinging everyone to say hello in the Slack community, through engaging with them one-on-one during office hours, through the Cup of Joe videos that I record. So things like that all contribute to making sure that my presence as the instructor remains throughout the semester, and that there is no point where I drop off for a week or two without any interaction with my students. So presence really does matter.
And this is an area of specialty for me in creating video stories for companies, for organizations. I've even made a video for a department at Rutgers highlighting an award winner. So if any of you want to have a conversation with me one-to-one about presence in video, I am so happy to do that. Unfortunately, today it's a much bigger conversation than what I have to offer. But if you struggle with being yourself on video or adding those humanizing elements to yourself in a recording that maybe you could do if it was in person, but it's harder in video, I'm happy to talk to you more about that, because it really is so important that students, anyone that we speak to, really can truly get a sense of us on video too. And lastly, we need to have fun, guys. I am a firm believer in this. When you go to workshops, are they more memorable for you if you had fun or if you didn't have fun? I'm hoping the answer is
fun.
Gotta be if they have more fun, right? At least I know it is for me. And I'm not sure when we decided that higher education learning could not be fun to be respectable, but I don't agree that fun means frivolous. I don't believe that. And I think we can have fun with the content and have it be related to the content we do in class. And this is something that I really enjoy doing with my students, is adding elements of fun that are on task, and sometimes just help build such a great sense of community. Because think about this, we don't laugh with people we don't like. When we have laughter and enjoyment in a room, it's because we're with people we like. And when we like people, we feel more like ourselves, and we can be true to ourselves and have a great time learning. And when those filters are down, then the learning is easier. And so is the respect and the trust that I think is really valuable in our higher education classrooms.
Shall we play a game? Now we have to make a little in-the-moment decision here, Tatiana. We are down to 5 minutes, and I want to also leave time to hopefully handle a few questions. So maybe we can run through this.
This is gonna be lightning round. All right, you guys, get your fingers ready here. We're gonna play a game called Google Predict. I searched up some terms yesterday on Google, and I want you to guess what these endings are. All right, so I typed in college professors are. What do you think are some of the words that came up in that first results screen? So throw them in the discussion forum if you could right now. We're going to play super, super fast. What do you think some of the replies were? College professors are. Shelly.
What else? Dull, boring. Anything else that comes to mind? College professors are.
3, intelligent. Ooh, Antoinette is out of touch.
Shelly coming in with a harsh 2 cents there. Anything else? Well,
I'm gonna pop in the answer in 3, 2, 1. College professors are the worst. Part of consulting professionals. So these are the first things that come up on Google about us. Old. She says old. That's funny. All right.
So Kelly wasn't too far off, really.
All right. Next question. Good college professors are. What do you think the replies were here? Good college professors.
Hard to find, young, paid well. Young. Antoinette, good luck finding good college professors that are paid well. Young, hard to find. Anything else? Understanding, energetic.
Oh, nice. I see we're getting these are some good ones. Okay, very good. Here's the answer. Good references. So apparently good professors are good references. That's pretty much the only thing that came up about college professors. Here's another one. My favorite professor. How do you think Google adds words here? My favorite professor, blank. This was a little harder.
Inspiring, challenges me, changed my life. That's
wow. These are good. These are some good ones. Good job, you guys. Very good. Regina, Heidi, Shelley, thank you. The answer is my favorite professor essay of all time. Who knows? Happy birthday to my favorite professor. A letter to my favorite professor. So we're getting a little more favorable here, a little more positive spin on this part here.
Do you want to do one more, Tatiana? And then I want to leave us a second or two to.
How about this one, everybody? College students are. What came up when we searched up college? Oh, and Shahida, okay, stressed, says Jamie. Tired.
In PJs. I mean, yeah, past year. Overworked.
Overworked.
Checked out.
You guys are on the right track. The ones that came up, that they're lazy, depressed, poor, broke, stressed, worst, and overworked. Right. So Antoinette did guess overworked. Shahida says that we're frozen, but I think, Shahida, it might be an issue on your end because the other people are playing the game. So I think that we're not frozen for everybody else. So maybe try to refresh your page. Maybe that will help. All right, you guys. So we had a couple more planned for you, but we'll stop there because we also wanted to say good college students. These were some of the answers, very much the same. And then also my favorite college student here. So that's a quick game you can play in your own classrooms with your own content, right? Google Predict, take it, learn from it, and enjoy it. And this is what came up when I tried to do a search for online learning. Not effective, is bad, is good, is impersonal, is stressful, is bad for mental health. So a lot of negative associations with us as college professors in Google world and with online learning in general. So if you remember in the beginning, we asked you to type in the chat, what was that first word that you thought about when you thought about change? Well, our challenge for you is, how are we going to change this narrative? How are we going to make those words much more positive and a better association with us? So that is what we want to leave you with, this challenge to help us change the narrative in higher education.
So with that, with 25 seconds, there's a countdown. It feels very dramatic, doesn't it? I want to thank you all for joining us today, especially at the last breakout session on the second day. I'm sure you've all learned so much today, and I hope you learned a little bit from us. Please stay connected. Our email addresses are at the bottom of the screen there, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.